Three longtime friends, Mark, Josh, and Sarah, had dreamed of escaping the madness of the city ever since their college days. When they finally found a free week, they chose an old house that stood on a rise near Lake Soren. The nearest town was more than 40 kilometers away, and the road to the house wound through dense pine forests where the signal disappeared long before they even saw the roof. The owner rarely rented the place out, and at a low price. People rarely want to travel that far, he had said over the phone. But if you need silence, you will not find a better place. When the friends arrived, the sun was already sinking behind the horizon. The house looked old, but well kept. Dark wooden walls, narrow windows, a high terrace overlooking the lake. The air was cold and smelled of wet earth. Perfect, Mark sighed, stretching his arms. No neighbors, no noise. Paradise. Sarah looked around nervously. Something about the house unsettled her. Perhaps the silence, which seemed to press down from above. The lake looked unnaturally still, as if someone had covered it with glass. "I do not like how it shines at night," she whispered. "It is just water." Josh reassured her. "You are tired, that is all." But even he watched the dark surface with tension. The first hours were ordinary. They unpacked their things, found an old record player, turned on some music. Mark made dinner. Sarah lit the fireplace. Josh explored the house, but one thing caught his attention. Not a speck of dust anywhere. It was as if someone lived there, as if someone had cleaned everything just a day earlier. "That is strange," he told the others. The owner said no one had been here for months. "Well, maybe he just wants to rent it for more," Mark suggested. But that explanation satisfied Josh only, briefly. By evening, they stepped out onto the terrace. The silence was so deep it felt like you could hear not only your own breathing, but your own thoughts. The lake lay dark and bottomless, split by a thin road of moonlight. "It looks less like water and more like a black abyss," Sarah said, "as if it is alive." "Oh, stop it," Mark waved her off. "Do not start." But at that very moment, Josh thought he saw something move beneath the surface, just a faint shadow rolling under the water. He exhaled and decided not to mention it. At night, he woke to a sound, like someone lightly dragging a fingernail across glass. Host listened, the sound came again. He got up, walked to the window, and froze. On the outer side of the glass was a long, wet streak, from the very bottom to the very top, like a hand had slid upward. But the fingers were too long. Abnormally long. Josh stood there, trying to come up with a rational explanation. Condensation. Rain. But there was no rain. When he touched the streak with his finger, it felt cold as water from the depths of a lake. In the morning, Mark stepped outside and immediately called the others. "Look at the ground." There were footprints on the damp soil. Bare footprints only larger than those of any person, with very long toes, and they led from the water directly to the terrace steps, then turned back toward the lake. "Is this some kind of joke?" Sarah asked. "I did not go outside last night," Josh replied. They went silent. There was no explanation. The second day passed in attempts to distract themselves. They fished. They walked through the forest, but they constantly felt watched. The trees stood too close together, and it was too quiet, unnervingly quiet. Sarah looked back several times, certain she saw movement between the trunks, but each time there was only mist. When they returned, the house was cold, even though the fire still glowed in the fireplace. Mark added more wood, and Josh turned on the old electric heater in the bedrooms. It clicked, then went dark. "Are the outlets working?" "They are working," Sarah answered. "My phone charged, but the heater would not turn on. Not then, not later." In the evening, when Sarah walked into the kitchen, she saw a light in the lake. It was below the surface, soft, warm, like a lantern someone was holding underwater. "Guys, come here!" she called. All three stood at the window, pressing close to one another. The light moved closer to the shore, in slow circles, as if something large was being carried by a current. But the lake had no current. The light went out as suddenly as it had appeared. "That is not a fish," Mark said. "That is not anything natural," Josh whispered. And no one disagreed. On the third night, the wind hit with such force that the pines around the house began to groan ominously. Sarah could not sleep. She wandered through the house, listening to the wind. But beneath the howling, she heard something else. A faint tapping. It came from the walls. She touched the wooden paneling and froze when she realized the sound was coming from inside. The tapping returned, clearer this time. As if someone... Sarah rushed to him through the dark hallway. "Josh, were you asleep?" "What?" He rubbed his eyes. "There is water by the door. It was not me." He answered quietly. The next evening, Mark said, "I want to figure this out. Everything is becoming stranger. Maybe it is some kind of animals." "Animals do not glow underwater," Sarah said. But they still went down to the lake. Their flashlights shone dimly, as if something invisible muted the light inside them. The sand near the shore was covered in footprints. Fresh ones. Very fresh. And all of them led from the water toward the house and back. Josh bent down and touched one. The print was wet and clear, as if it had been left a second ago. While they stood there, light flared again in the water, but this time it was much closer. It was rising slowly, as if something was emerging to meet them. A large shadow appeared beneath the surface, without clear shape, but with long arms, drifting gently. The light went out. The shadow vanished, and suddenly, right at their feet, a new footprint appeared in the sand. Wet. "Left, just now." "Run?" Sarah said in a trembling voice, and this time, no one argued. They grabbed their things so fast they nearly forgot the keys in the door. The car sped down the dark road, and in the rearview mirror the house stood for a long while. Black, motionless, as if it was pursuing them. No one spoke until they reached the highway. A month passed. The friends did not talk about what they had seen. Each of them woke at night from strange sounds in their apartment, as if someone touched the walls from the inside. Sarah several times sensed the smell of wet earth near her window. Josh found damp footprints on the windowsill, but they kept convincing themselves it was only stress. And the lake was waiting. Sometime after the friends left the house by the lake, they tried to continue their lives, but the lake followed them like a silent shadow. Mark became withdrawn. He hardly ever left home and wrote down everything that happened. Strange noises, faint scratches at night, a breath of cold air appearing from nowhere. Josh began seeing shadows in mirrors, long and distorted, just like the footprints near the lake. At night, Sarah heard the sound of water, as if someone walked barefoot on wet sand beneath her window. They did not speak to each other. Perhaps they were afraid to say aloud what they already knew. The house had not let them go. One day, Sarah received a letter. A paper one, in a yellowed envelope. There was no return address, only her name, written in uneven handwriting. Inside was a single sheet. On it, a familiar footprint. The same one. Long fingers, a blurred shape, a damp mark that seemed to seep through the paper, and at the bottom, a phrase, "Return what you took." That same day, Sarah called Mark and Jas, her voice trembling. "It knows where we live." They met in a cafe they chose intentionally crowded among noise, light, voices, yet they still sat very close, almost pressed together, as if it could somehow help. "I received a letter too," Josh said. "Yesterday." "And primera did," Mark whispered, but mine said, "Come back." They were silent for a long time, the words stuck in their throats, but they still sounded the same. They needed to return to that house, not because they wanted to, but because every day was becoming worse. That evening they drove the familiar road again, through the pine forest that seemed darker than before. The wind creaked in the branches, as if someone hid among them. When the car approached the house, the lake lay silent, smooth, cold, and completely black. No reflection at all. Sarah instinctively pressed a hand to her chest. "I do not want to go in," she whispered. "We have to," Mark replied. "We need to understand what it wants from us." They entered. The door that creaked last time opened now without a sound, as if it was waiting. Inside it was clean. So clean it felt like someone had been living there the whole time. "Look," Josh pointed at the table. On it were 3 cups. Three, half filled with water, cold as the lake. "Someone knew we would come back," Sarah whispered, but her voice held no surprise, only fear. The first thing they heard was a sound. It was coming from the basement. Not a knock, not a rustle. A soft, steady breathing, very slow, as if someone was asleep. Josh turned on his flashlight. "Let us go together." Sarah did not want to, but she followed because together they felt safer. The stairs to the basement were damp. The flashlight flickered dot. When they reached the bottom, Mark froze first. The basement was flooded to their ankles. Lake water, cold, clear, still. And at its center, that light, the same one they saw underwater. It was not strong, just a pale glow, as if someone held a firefly beneath the surface. But this time it did not retreat. It was rising slowly. "Back," Sarah whispered, but it was too late. A shadow began to rise from the water. No clear form, something amorphous, but with long fingers on its hands. Its movements were slow and soft, but there was something deeply human in them. As if someone who had long forgotten how to walk. The shadow had no face, only emptiness. It stood in the water up to its knees, and watched it watched without eyes. "What do you want?" Mark whispered, although he did not expect an answer. But the answer came. The shadows on the walls began to move, not like reflections of the flashlight. They moved on their own and merged into words. "You must return what you took." Sarah shuddered. "We did not take anything. Nothing." But the shadow moved forward, quietly, almost smoothly. Josh understood. "The letters." He lowered his head. "I took them with me." The shadow stopped, and that was the answer. Josh placed the letters on the water. The paper soaked instantly, and the ink spread. The shadow leaned down, touched the water with its long fingers, and the light around them weakened. "Is that all?" Sarah whispered. "Can we go?" But the shadow did not move. The light slowly faded. And then, the water began to recede, slowly lowering, as if someone was draining it into an invisible well. When the water disappeared completely, the basement floor was dry. Without a single drop, the shadows on the walls vanished. The shadow in the center, gone to... "Maybe that is it," Mark said, speaking with difficulty. "We can go. It is time." They went upstairs. The house was empty. Truly empty. For the first time since they had arrived. And as they stepped outside, Mark glanced back one last time. The house stood calm, dark, and lifeless, as if it had finally released them. They drove away without saying a word. That night, Josh slept more peacefully than in the last 3 months. Sarah had no nightmares, and Mark finally heard silence. But exactly at midnight, all 3 received a phone call. The voice on the line was quiet, muffled, as if from the bottom of the water. "Thank you for returning the letters. But you left the door open." Only 2 days passed after that call. Josh did not show up for work. Sarah did not respond to messages. Mark stopped updating his notebook. At first, no one paid attention. The friends sometimes disappeared for a while, trying to recover from what they had been through. But when their families could not reach any of them, all 3 were declared missing. Police arrived at Mark's house first. Everything inside was in place. Phone on the table, wallet on the shelf, jacket hanging by the door, as if he stepped out for just a minute. In Josh's apartment, the light was on, but he had not taken his keys. At Sarah's place, the window was open, and the curtain barely swayed in the wind. No signs of struggle, no traces. Only one detail repeated in every home. A glass on the table, empty but wet, as if water had just been in it. Police did not know what to think. But those who knew the three friends knew. That call was not a warning. It was an invitation, and all three accepted it. A week later, near Lake Soren, when the fog was thicker than usual, a fisherman noticed three silhouettes on the water's surface. They stood still, facing away from the shore, as if staring into the black mirror below them. When the fisherman called out, the silhouettes vanished instantly. But footprints remained on the sand, bare feet leading into the water, and none leading back.